So welcome everyone today to our session, Mental Martial Arts. I'm really looking forward to this session and spending this time with you. And it's about learning how to defeat the mental criminals that seek to rob us. And we would understand as we go through the session what that is all about. So if my clicker will work, there we go. So many of you do know me, many of you know me well. But my name is Ezra Ben Israel. I am the director and founder of Edifying Answers. On the left-hand side is some of the things that I do, some of my roles, but essentially I'll be the person delivering this workshop today. So Edifying Answers is very much about what our strapline says, unlocking insights. And this session is very much about really helping us to understand the mental criminals that we have to face and deal with, and giving us some of the strategies and tools to address them effectively. So we deliver a whole range of workshops at Edifying Answers, which is on that list and a few more. There's new ones that recently have been designed. But today we're focusing on mental martial arts. And so what we'll be covering today is we will be exploring the mindset traps that often keep us bound or restricted. We're going to examine and identify the 6 mental criminals that rob us of our peace and purpose. If people could put your mics on mute, just so we don't have the background noise. There will be sections where we get a chance to talk and people can unmute, but if we keep them on mute, that would be great. We're also going to look at the importance and the benefits of your mental diet. So we'll touch a bit on that as well. We're also going to reflect on the 5 essential areas of damage caused by our mental criminals. We're going to learn the essential techniques to defend ourselves against mental criminals. And we'll also be provided with 6 tips to deal with uncertainty. Okay. So I want to start off by saying that we are all under construction. We're all going through different processes. We're all learning to understand ourselves in different ways. But it's important to understand that the construction part is the most important part of any building, any development. And so it's really important that you have a firm foundation, that you take the time to know and understand yourself, and that you build upon a solid foundation. And so with what we're going to be covering today is helping you to really be aware of maybe some of the gaps, but also the things that you can do to strengthen, to condition, to make sure that you are in that right place mentally, emotionally, physically. And so another important thing that we have to recognize is that we cannot rely on perfection or wait for perfection before we go live with your life. Okay. So many people are waiting for that perfect moment. They're waiting for a time when they're strong enough, wise enough, have enough knowledge to go forward and try something. But the important thing to remember is that perfection is founded in fear, because perfection is I can't do anything wrong, or it has to be perfect before I can move forward. And so it's important to realize that we have to, sorry, we have to take steps, we have to move forward, we have to try things out. And making a mistake or failing or not getting that perfect outcome is fine. That's a part of the process we call life. But it's very important that we do not allow these mental criminals to keep us from going live with our lives, so that we're just spectators of our life rather than performers, rather than actually doing things to better ourselves. And so it's really important that we are aware of that. And this quote is a really powerful quote. It says, if you want to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition, not perfection. And so the way how we get better at things, and the way how we learn to master things, and the way how we become more confident in doing things is by repetition. It's by starting where you are, doing what you can with what you have. And so it's really important that we recognize and understand that. At the beginning of everything is always difficult. And we can all look back over our lives and see that, from crawling to walking to learning to talk, to read, to write, to run, to ride a bike, when starting a new job. There's nothing that we've done where we've just been perfect at it straight away. It's always a learning process of us going live with our life and learning as we go forward. Now, I want to touch briefly on what I have called and designed as OI, mindset traps. Now, the word OI within itself is no one would want to be called that way. And the people who do that are often doing it in a negative, "Oi, come here." You know, it's not seen as a term of endearment and stuff like that. And so that's why I called it OI mindsets, because it's those mindsets that are counterproductive. It's those mindsets that actually trip us and trap us. Okay. And so OI stands for, one of the things is old, outdated, and inflexible. And so sometimes we can hold on to mindsets that are old, they're outdated, and they're inflexible. And they don't help us and they don't serve us in any way, shape, or form. And so it's really important that we are aware of when we are operating out of these OI mindsets, these outdated ways of thinking, you know, dwelling on the past, looking at the things that happened 5, 10, 7, 15 years ago, and allowing that to determine your reality. It also stands for out of ideas. And so quite often when we are operating out of that OI mindset, it's a fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset, and looking about how we can do things differently, trying things differently, doing things in a different way. And so it's always, I don't know. When something happens, oh, I don't know. And so we've got to be very careful of that kind of mindset, because it doesn't allow for us to try new things, to step out of our comfort zone, to do things in a different way. It also is about outburst of immaturity. And so when we have that kind of OI mindset, we often react first and then think later. And so what often happens is we end up getting ourselves into situations and circumstances that afterwards we think, oh, if only I'd thought it through, if only I'd done differently. So it's to be careful of these OI mindsets. And the final one, sorry, is obsessive orientated impulses. So where we're often doing things based on impulse, based on the quick win, based on the what I call the PIG, the problem of immediate gratification. And so whenever we are operating out of these mindsets, it can be very damaging, because we're focusing on the short-term gain at the expense of the long-term consequence. And so that OI mindset can be quite damaging in our lives in small or big ways and in various different situations. And so it's really important that we are aware of and mindful of where that mindset and that mind trap is holding us bound and keeping us captive. Okay. So we're here today to look at mental martial arts. That's fine. That's fine. So we're here today to look at mental martial arts, which is about learning how to defend yourself against mental criminals that seek to rob you of your peace, your joy, your dreams, your goals, and your purpose. And we're going to look at what they are in a second, but these mental criminals are the most notorious gang in the world. They have caused the most damage, the most carnage to people's lives across the globe. And so it's about time that we learn to defend ourselves against these mental criminals, just as many people take up martial arts. I mean, I train martial arts and teach martial arts as well. But many people actually start martial arts because they're being bullied or because people are troubling them. And so it's really important that we take time, especially in this time and seasons that we are living in, to learn the mental martial arts, how we can actually defend ourselves and keep our peace and our joy and our happiness. So, my click will work. There we go. So let's look at these 6 mental criminals. The first one is fear. False evidence appearing real. And it's an unpleasant emotion caused by the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Fear is something that holds so many people bound. It stops us from doing so many things that we can actually do. And so it's something that it's really important that we learn to deal with and address, because there's 2 definitions for fear. There is false evidence appearing real, and there is facing everything and rise. And that's the place where we want to get to. That's the place where we are using mental martial arts to help us to overcome those situations and circumstances, or those things within our mind that are making us feel and act and behave certain ways. The second one is worry. And so worry is about a mental distress or agitation resulting from concern, usually for something impending or anticipated. Now, worry is something that really can take us down what in psychology is known as the worry chain, where one thought leads onto another thought, which leads onto another thought, which takes us on like a runaway train, thinking the worst case scenario and all the ways that something is going to go wrong. And that worry can be quite detrimental to our health and to our ability to do the things that we want to do. The third one is anxiety, a feeling of discomfort, nervousness, or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. Now, the thing about anxiety is what happens within the brain is what's known as the amygdala hijack. So your amygdala is like the fire alarm system of your brain. And what happens is it's constantly being triggered with false fire alarms. So what happens with anxiety is it's constantly being triggered, and it's making people respond or react certain ways, even when the threat or danger isn't there. And so that's why anxiety can be so consuming and detrimental to people's peace, their joy, their happiness, their progress. It's because this their internal fire alarm system is always being triggered. And the problem is with anxiety is often a result of what you're thinking about and what you're believing is going to come that is triggering that fire alarm, rather than there being a real threat there. And so this is one of those mental criminals that really can heap havoc in people's lives and stop people from doing a lot of the things that they can do, and even influencing them so that they're just really stuck within themselves, and panic attacks and all other kind of things can happen as a result of that anxiety. The fourth one is imposter syndrome. And, you know, interestingly, 70% of the population within the world has experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their life. So it's a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite evident success. So people feel like a phony. People feel like they're just an imposter, that it was by fluke or luck that they were able to achieve what they achieved. And the interesting thing about the imposter syndrome is that the more that you achieve is the more that you feel that you're an imposter. And so this is a very devious mental criminal that holds so many people captive, influences so many people's lives. Fifth one is inner critic. And this inner critic is the concept, or is also known as the monkey, the chimp, is the inner voice that judges and criticizes and demeans you. It's often very negative, highlights all of the problems, all the things that's going to go wrong. And the sixth and the final one is limiting beliefs. So those counterproductive thoughts and opinions about yourself that you believe to be absolute truth. And the thing is, with these six mental criminals, sometimes they operate by themselves. Sometimes they go out in twos, threes, fours, and sometimes all six. But it's important to be aware of your enemy and how it is impacting on your life, how it affected you today, this week, this month, this year. You know, and they move and operate in line with events, situations, circumstances, people who are around you. And so it's really important because, as I always say, the mind is the battlefield. And every battle is won and lost in the mind first. And so it's important that we understand when we are having these mental fights, when we are being robbed, when we have to defend ourselves and use tools and techniques to overcome these six mental criminals. So the important thing is that we have to learn to identify our attackers. You know, if someone gets robbed or something happens and they go to the police station and they've caught a few people, they would have a lineup and they need to identify who their attacker is. And it's so key and it's so important that you are able to identify what mental criminals is it that has been attacking you? What one has been holding you captive? And so it's acknowledging that it is there is essential, because until you do that, you can't take active steps to start to address them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into a breakout room. And what I want you to do in your group is just share what mental criminal has been harassing you. And it might have been, from what I've shared, it might have been one that you didn't even realize, or it might be two, but just have a discussion and just start to talk about it. And I think one of the good things about having these discussions is it helps you to normalize it and realize it's not just you. There we go. So one of the things that is really important to be aware of is that it is mental warfare that we're in. And, you know, for those who don't know, or if you maybe you do, Mike Tyson is on the right there and Bruce Lee is on the left. And that's kind of like what we're in. It's like the clash of titans. But in that picture, if you notice, both sides are throwing their attack. And what often happens with us is we're not defending ourselves against these mental criminals. And it's really important that we fight back, fight for our freedom, fight for our joy, fight for our peace, fight for our dreams, our goals, and our desires. And so it's really important that we learn to, and we start to defend ourselves against these mental criminals that are attacking us, sometimes on an hourly basis, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And so it's time now for us to begin to fight back and not just be a victim of these mental criminals. Now, it's very important that we understand the importance of our mental diet, of the things that we are allowing to go into our mind, the things that we're allowing to take up our mental space and capacity, because that is a key driver to either influencing or helping us to stand against these mental criminals. So our mental diet is so important. And I think, you know, when we think about our physical diet, we know that we can't just be eating cakes, donuts, pizzas, burgers, and stuff like that every day. Whether we want to is a different thing, but we know it's not healthy to do it. But sometimes we're doing that with our mental diet. And so if you imagine all these different types of foods and restaurants that we can go to, but if we think of each of those as actual from a mental perspective, these are the kind of things of what they are. And so if we are mentally dieting on these things on a consistent basis, just like if we was eating that physically, the carnage, the damage, and the harm it will cause, is the same thing what it's doing mentally. And so sometimes why we are bound by fear, why we are consumed by worry, why anxiety gets the better of us, why our inner critic is destroying our confidence and self-esteem, and all of these types of things is because of our mental diet. And so we have to be careful of what we are entertaining. Social media, news, people you have around you. What are you taking into your mind? What are you feeding yourself? Is it things that's building you up, or is it things that's putting you down? And it's really important that your diet is balanced and that it's in ways that's going to help you. And so it's really important that we take stock of that. We have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 90% of those thoughts are rumination. And for many people, 70% of those thoughts are negative. And so if you are watching things, listening to things, being around people that's actually going to aggravate that statistic, it's going to be detrimental for you to then be able to try and do something new. It's going to be very hard for you to begin to try and do something out of your comfort zone. Procrastination is going to become a good friend of yours. And so it's really important that we be aware of our mental diet. It's key. It's paramount, because where the mind goes, the energy flows. And so it's important that you reflect on this and really think about, what are some of the things I need to let go of? What are some of the things that I'm watching that don't serve me? What's some of the music I'm listening to that actually doesn't make me feel good? What's some of the conversations that I'm engaging with and afterwards my spirit just doesn't feel the same? All of these things are key factors. All of these things can either help us to stand against those mental criminals or give them license to jump in. So be very careful. So the damage that these mental criminals can cause cover various different aspects and areas. So the first one is mentally. Fear, worry, anxiety, imposter syndrome, all of these things. What they serve to do is to make us think rigid in terms of our thought processes. Makes us look at what we can't do, our limitations, our lacks. It makes us doubt ourselves, look at ourselves from a negative standpoint, always limiting ourselves. Whenever something happens, we look at all the ways that it can go wrong rather than the ways it can go right. And so mentally, it's like we're trapped in a cage where we can see through the cage and see all the blessings out there. But for some reason, it's not for us. For some reason, there's always a reason as to why it will go wrong if we try. Fear will make it look like it's the hardest thing to do. Worry will keep you so bound that you don't even want to take a step forward. Imposter syndrome will tell you all the reasons as to why your successes before was a fluke, so don't give it a go now. Limiting beliefs are going to make you think about everything that went wrong when you tried previously. Even though you've grown from then, even though you know more from those times. But mentally, if we can be trapped in our minds, then we can be trapped in our bodies. When the enemy within is conquered, the enemy without can do us no harm. And so one of the most important things that these mental criminals want to do is to keep you bound mentally, is to make you doubt yourself, is to make you not look at your strengths, but your weaknesses. And that causes havoc in every area of our lives. There are so many people who don't go forward and do the things that they could actually do quite easily because of how they see themselves. And I'll tell you an example of how this plays out in life in one of the biggest catastrophes. So the reason why, you notice how in circuses and stuff like that, how they would have an elephant and they can control this elephant in any way that they want, that they'll make it stand somewhere and it doesn't move. Do you know how they do that? What they do is they tie the elephant to a big tree. And the elephant in the beginning is trying to fight against the tree, it's trying to move against it, it's constantly pulling against it to no avail. And once they see that the spirit of the elephant is broken and that it's no longer trying anymore, what they then do is they tie it to a small chair. And the elephant, because now its mind has been broken, it's been conditioned, it will think the chair is the tree, so it doesn't bother to move. And that's the same thing that these mental criminals do to us. They break us, they keep us bound for so long. And so we now see ourselves from that perspective, even though we are not in the same situation, we're not the same individual, and we're not in the same place. Mentally, to have rigid thought processes. The second one is emotionally. So we have negative thought cycles. And so what happens is our emotional states and currents are constantly breeding negativity. So it's releasing adrenaline, it's releasing cortisol, it's causing for our bodies to become programmed to operate in these states, in these conditions. Because one of the interesting things is that over time, the more that we consistently do something is the more that the body becomes programmed because it keeps the score. And so sometimes we can be triggered because the body is now leading, it becomes the subconscious mind. And so we're often reacting to what's going on in our bodies. And then as a result of that, we start to think on things and it becomes a negative cycle. And so it's very important to be aware of how these criminals affect us emotionally and how that impacts on us. And so we are often driven by our emotions, controlled by our emotions, rather than living out the experience of our emotions. The third one is physically. So we have poor and compromised health. One of the things is the more that we are worrying, the more that we are anxious, the more that we are stressed, the more that we are holding on to these things, is the more that our bodies are being impacted and affected by it. And then what happens is we start to then suppress those emotions, which then go internally into our bodies, and we reap the benefits. Sorry, not the benefits, we reap the consequences of that compromised health, fatigue, headaches, pains, aches, so all of those things that we're manifesting in our body. And we've all experienced it when you're stressed and you're tense around things, or you've been worried and anxious for a long time, how it affects us, our stomach, our body, the legs, all of these different things that where our body is being impacted as a result of what is going on in our minds. The fourth one is financially. And many people don't stop to consider this area, but just think about how many bad decisions we made because of fear, or because of worry, or because of anxiety, or because of imposter syndrome, how it's affected our job choices, our career choices, how it stopped us from stepping into opportunities that could have better our life, how we make decisions that are bad and wrong because of those things, how it's impacted on us. And so it's really important to be aware that financially is a big way that these mental criminals rob us. because of missed opportunities. And the final one is spiritually. Again, another big one that people often don't consider. Your values, your purpose, your why. All of these areas that are hindered, affected, influenced by these mental criminals. You know, where you know that there is something you should have done, but fear stopped you from moving forwards. When there's something that you really value, wanted to be a part of, but anxiety kept you bound. Where there is things that of purpose for you and you're really passionate about, but your limiting beliefs made you not step forwards. And so it's important for us to recognize there is so much that is at stake. There is so much things that these mental criminals have hindered us, stopped us and prevented us from achieving, from doing, from excelling in, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, or spiritually. So what I did want to do is just give you an opportunity to have a discussion around this and just reflect. So it's essential that we learn the techniques to defend ourselves against these mental criminals. We now see and know how damaging and how dangerous they can be. And so in most martial arts styles, you will find that you have these kind of tools that they use: block, punch, kick, elbow, knee, and palm strike. Now, with some styles do things differently. Things like judo don't throw any strikes, but essentially these are like the core techniques that are in a lot of different martial art styles. And these are acronyms for things that we are going to be using to help us defend ourselves. Now, today in this session, we're only going to be looking at blocking. I'll touch a bit more on the others at the end in terms of, you know, the sessions that I'm doing around that. But blocking is fundamental. Blocking is one of the fundamental things you need to learn, regardless of what style you're doing. If you can't block, if you can't defend yourself and evade and move out of the way, you don't get to do anything else. You don't get to throw anything. Yeah, so blocking is the one that we're going to start off with in terms of today, in terms of the technique that you use to defend yourself. And so when we're talking about blocking, the first thing is your breath. Now, many people don't realize how important your breath is. It's the first and last thing that you will ever do in life. But your breathing can have a significant impact on how you do things, the intensity you do things, especially when training or exercise or fighting and stuff like that. Your breathing is paramount. So for anyone who is trained in anything like yoga, sports, martial arts, they would use diaphragmatic breathing. Yeah, it's a certain way in which you breathe, and when you breathe in, your stomach goes out, and when you breathe out, your stomach comes in. And breath is so important. It's fundamental. And so even when having panic attacks, the key thing to help you to get over that panic attack is your breathing, because when you take deep breaths, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So your rest and digest, which helps you to slow down, rather than operating out your sympathetic nervous system, which is your your adrenaline release, your fight or flight. And so that's why they don't give you any medication. They give you a brown bag and they say take deep breaths. And because what you're doing by your breathing is you're controlling your emotions, you're controlling your emotional state and how you feel in that situation. And so breathing is so important. Breathing can make a big difference and give you that clarity. Breathing helps you to recover quicker from if you're tired or if you've been running and stuff like that. And so your breath is so important, and being aware of your breath, because you can understand when you're starting to get anxious or worried or fearful or something because your breathing changes. And so it's so important in terms of being able to defend yourself. Your breath is a key factor in that. And so deep breaths triggers Also the release of endorphins, which help you to feel good and which help to relieve pain. And so it's fundamental in terms of recognizing how important breathing is. And we know if we don't breathe, we die. But even in terms of how we breathe and when we're breathing, it's really important to help you to be aware of what's going on for you. And the more oxygen that is in your blood, is the better your body functions and it increases energy. Okay. So even in just in terms of um, being able to have the capacity to deal with fear, worry, anxiety, if any of those things. When you breathe and you have more oxygen in your body, it gives you more energy to do the things you need to do. It gives you the ability to push through. It gives you the strength to take that risk, to take that chance. And so your breathing is so important in helping you to combat things and giving you the ability to do things with greater capacity. The second one, which is L, is learn. So one of the most important things in terms of when people are doing self-defense is that you have to learn techniques. You have to learn the blocks. You have to learn the footwork. You have to learn the techniques. And this is exactly the same in terms of dealing with mental criminals. You need to learn and understand their tactics. What do they use? When do they attack you? What tends to be the time? What tends to be the situation? How is it that they tend to move to influence you, to afflict you, to harm you? And it's about learning how do you address this? Learning what are the tools and the techniques that I use? How do I need to be standing? How do I need to be breathing? How do I need to be operating? What do I need to be aware of? What are my triggers? And so learning is so important. The mind is a muscle. And the more that you train it and develop it in being able to see the warning signs, the triggers, the impacts, the effects, what's going on for you internally, how are you thinking, what are you entertaining, and how that influences and impacts on you. And so you have to be willing to study, to absorb, to inquire, to discover, and gain experience. And to gain and to experience new skills and knowledge. What you want to do is to be able to understand what has happened, what happened today, what happened yesterday, what happened in the last experience when fear got the better of you. What was you entertaining? What was you thinking about? Who was you around? All of these things are factors to help you to grow, to learn, and to do differently. But you have to be willing to do that. Whenever you make a mistake for those of you who don't know, I work within the substance misuse field. And when I used to do frontline work, if someone had a lapse or a relapse where they went back to using substances again, I would always say to them, what happened before you used? And what happened before that? And what happened before that? And what happened before that? Because I want them to learn and understand and recognize the steps that got them into that situation. That's when we learn so that we can do differently next time. And it's about being curious, and seeking out new experiences positively to stimulate the brain. And so it's about when imposter syndrome says you can't do that, they're gonna like, you're a phony, you know you're not any good at that. It's about you seeking out new experience. It's about reminding yourself, I'm doing this so that I grow. It doesn't matter if I fail because I will fail forwards. It's about using experiences and situations to empower yourself. And so learning is so important because the brain is the most important muscle that we have to work on a daily basis. And so as we learn, it's an experience, it's a way that we can change, how we can grow, how we can learn, how we can develop. And just as it is in physical self-defense, you know, as you learn and recognize this block is really powerful, this stance is really strong, This punch is really powerful to defeat my enemies. As you learn those things, that this affirmation is great. Thinking in this way actually strengthens me. Staying away from those people is actually good for my well-being. And so you are able then to navigate through situations differently. Then we have the O, which is for organize. One of the things that we have to do is be organized. When especially in martial arts, if someone's coming to attack you or you're doing a technique, you have to be organized in your mind and in your body and in your form and in your technique and in your stance. And it's the same way in life. You have to be organized. So can people put their things on mute, their mics on mute, please? So begin to establish, form, shape, consolidate, and have a strategy for your future. So you have identified today what these mental criminals are. You have looked at how they impact on your life. How are you now going to organize your day-to-day activities, your situations and circumstance, your mindset? What are you going to put in place? Have intention for how you start your day. What do you use as your remedy whether it's fear, worry, anxiety, or whatever comes against you? What affirmations do you have for yourself? What mantras are you going to say? Who are the people that you're going to know that you can call upon if you need to get some extra advice or support? And so it's about being organized. There's no point knowing these things, understanding these things, and not doing anything with it. And so it's really important that, remember, you are the CEO of your life. You are the gatekeeper of your destiny. You are the one who determines the outcomes. You are the one who determines whether these mental criminals will continue to afflict you and rule your life, or whether you are going to fight back and deal with and address them. And so start each day with intention. And remember that failing to plan means planning to fail. If you're getting up tomorrow and you know you've got a day where it's going to be difficult, where worry is going to come in, where you're fearful about things, how are you combating that? What do you start your day with to build you up? Many people eat breakfast. Why? Because it gives them energy and strength. Well, how are you getting your mental energy and strength? What are you saying to yourself? What are you reading? What are you focusing on? How are you placing yourself in the best position? Become organized. Have things that's going to build you up. Have a healthy mental diet. Speak things that's going to bring life into you, because then you are at your best to be able to combat those things. Then you are able to stand against those mental criminals. When limiting belief wants to come and tell you can't do it, you're not good enough, what's the affirmation? What's the counter affirmative thoughts, the CAT that you use to address and deal with that? Or do you just take it in, receive it, and walk with it? We have to be organized, because those mental criminals, they come sideways, they come from behind, they come at times when you don't think about it. But if you're organized and you already have your strategy, your plans of action, then you are able to combat and deal with them. The mental battle that goes on in your mind will be like the picture that I showed, Mike Tyson and Bruce Lee fighting each other, rather than you just being picked off. The C is about being committed. So one of the interesting things that I found over the years when learning martial arts is that when you learn a new technique or a new block, you always have this kind of ambivalence within your mind, because you think, well, how can this technique stop this big person from punching me? And one of the interesting things is if you don't fully commit when you're doing a block, you end up getting hit. And so it's about, you have to be fully committed in terms of making these changes in your life, in addressing these bullies that have been afflicting you. You have to be fully committed. You can't do it half-hearted. You can't do it with 50%. You have to go in 100%. And when you do, is when you see the results, is when you see the change. And so what are you going to commit to today? Where is the area that you're saying enough is enough? I'm not playing with this no more. I'm not giving 50% or 70%. I'm giving 100% into this. I'm really going for this. I'm going to challenge my fears. I'm going to deal with this anxiety. When I feel this way, I'm still going to push forwards. What is it for you? Everyone's unique and different in terms of where they are, in terms of their construction. But what are you going to commit to today? Where's the area that you've seen the gap and you're saying enough is enough? Become loyal, dedicated, devoted, and faithful in your choices and your actions. Failure is not an option. Procrastination is no longer my friend. Comfort zones, I have given up. What is it that you're going to commit to? And whenever any one of those mental criminals dares to show their ugly face, commit to what you said you're going to do. One of the things about bullies, if any of you've had to deal with them in your life, is when you fight back, they flee. Because there's so many other people who they can get away with doing this stuff without having to fight back. When you become committed, you overcome. Fear does not have to be a stronghold in your life. Worry does not have to be the very foundation of every day of your life. Limiting beliefs do not need to hold you back. You have power over them. But it's when you commit to the things that you have learned and you become organized in what you do and you use your breathing to give you the strength and the energy to do it. And so make a decision to be pledged or bound to a certain path, process, and set of behaviors. What do you need to start doing now so that you can become the person that you want to be? Make a commitment to yourself and have a drive and determination to follow it through regardless of what comes against you. The final one is kickstart. Kickstart. Now, kickstart is about, like when you make an effort to kind of change something and to start to move in a certain way. And you are the only device that can kickstart the engine of your motivation and determination. You're the only one that can do it. When you say enough is enough and you begin to move differently, that's when you kickstart. And so what is it that you're going to start doing? Where is it that you've been held back by the thoughts in your mind? Where is it that you've constantly told yourself, I can't do that, that's not for me, when it was for you? And have that motivation and that determination to say, by any means necessary, to say, I am good enough, I can do this, I will succeed, I will get the better of these mental criminals. No longer will I be bound. No longer am I holding on to the baggage of my past. I'm new, I'm changed, I'm different. I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm influential. What are those things you're going to start telling yourself to feed yourself that positive energy? And always remember that action is the primary and deciding factor of change, growth, and development. It doesn't matter how much we think about things and talk about things, it's action. It's action that makes things change. Take action today. Take action tomorrow. Don't delay, don't wait, don't procrastinate, don't hold out for perfection. Because the sooner that you start to do is the sooner that you start to change. And you learn and you grow and you develop each time you do it. But always remember, you miss 100% of the shots that you never take. And so take action, because at least you got a 50% chance of reaching your goal and your target. And so the first thing that we have to do is we have to learn to block, to deal with these mental criminals that are causing havoc in our life. And as we learn to breathe better, as we start to learn from situations, learn about ourselves, learn about our enemies. And if any of you have ever watched boxing, right? One of the things that boxers do is they study their opponent. When they know there's a boxing match coming, they'll look at all of their previous fights. Where is the gaps? Where's the holes? Where's their strengths? Where's the things that I can utilize against them? Start to learn and examine the thing that has been holding you bound. When does it come? When's the times when it's most likely to happen? How are you feeling at the time? What's going on for you? Learn your opponent so you can start to address and deal with them. Be organized, stay committed, and kickstart. Every day, kickstart. Every day. And the beauty about this is that you do not have to be great to get started. You don't. You can start from wherever you're at, but you have to get started to become great. And so even if you're starting today to address imposter syndrome, whichever one it may be, just start. Because as you continue and you are consistent in this, that's how you become great. Now, it's very important because there is lots of people who lack clarity, who will try to damage your focus. Make it a priority that you protect it. As you start to move differently, think differently, act differently, others who are still in the old mindset will want to make you be like them, act like them. Why are you trying that for? Why are you trying to reach too high? Why are you doing those things? You know you can't do it. They'll tell you all these kind of things because they're fearful of you moving forward and leaving them behind. And so you have to be very careful, going back to your mental diet. Take stock of the things that people tell you. Take stock of those people who often have, for every solution, they have a negative that why it can't happen, why it can't work. Those people are leeches, they're vampires. They zap you and drain you of your motivation and determination. And another thing that I often say is that every time I witness a strong person, I want to know what dark did you conquer in your story? You see, mountains do not rise without earthquakes. And so it's important to understand the journey that you are on, the battles that you are facing are the very things that's going to give you the strength to go to the next level. And so don't run away from the battle. Don't run away from these things. These things are preparing you, training you, and conditioning you so that you can go to the next stage of your life. And so it's really important. Remember that when you are going through your dark periods, as your mountain is rising through the earthquakes of addressing and dealing with and overcoming these mental criminals in your life. So just want to quickly share on this in terms of the story of the two wolves. And one of them is limiting beliefs and the other one is self-care. And this is the greatest war going on inside each human being. So the one wolf, which is limiting beliefs, and the other one who's self-care, who wants to help us, make us do those good things that are helpful and supportive and to give us the advice that we need. But it depends on which one we choose to listen. The winner will be determined by the wolf that you feed the most. And so if we are feeding limiting beliefs and imposter syndrome and fear and all those things, that's the one that's going to be stronger. That's the one that's going to be dominant in our lives. But if we are feeding self-care and affirmations and positivity and, looking at ourselves from in a good perspective, that's the wolf that's going to be stronger. And so it's important to recognize that with every thought, with everything you say about yourself, and every action you take that can either better your life or cause you harm. And so I love this quote because it's so true. A fresh start isn't a place, it's a mindset. It's a mindset. And it can start today, right now, within your mind. You can choose to be different from today. The choice is yours. So I just want to quickly go over a few points of dealing with uncertainty. Now, research shows that people react differently to uncertainty, and that those with a higher intolerance for uncertainty may be less resilient and more prone to low mood, negativity, or down feelings and anxiety. So there's 6 points I want to quickly go over. The first one is to be kind to yourself. Okay, what the mental criminals are hoping for is for you to be hard upon yourself, and so they can jump on the bandwagon. Okay, don't beat yourself up when you make a mistake. Be patient with yourself and recognize you're on a journey. Secondly, limit your exposure to news. Limit the amount of exposure you have to listening to just negative energy, negative news, bad news. It doesn't do anything for you but bring you down. And it might not happen straight away, but it's stripping away the layers. And so be very careful with the energy that is around you. Very important. Very important. If people really understood how important your energy is, it's fundamental. It determines everything. Number 3, reflect on past successes. One of the things that often happens is when it's a negative thing, we can think and dwell upon that for so long, consistently. But we don't reflect on our past successes. We don't reflect on how we've grown. We don't have a trophy diary where we can reflect on those things that we actually have done, which are so key for when situations come up. The imposter syndrome wants to attack you, when fear's coming in, when worry and anxiety, and we're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this? If you have a book, a diary, a journal that you have been keeping, you can look over that. Actually, what am I talking about? I accomplished this. I did that. I'm able to do this. Reflect on your past successes. Very important. 4, seek support from people you can trust. Okay? All of us have our low days. All of us have those times and those moments where we don't feel that we can do things, or we're worried, or we're anxious. You need to have a supportive network, people that you can call on in those moments of needs, a friend, family member, a coach, whatever it may be, but you need support from people that you can trust. Number 5, engage in self-care. Okay, it's so important that you are engaging in self-care and that you have healthy routines, whether it's, eating well, exercise, getting enough sleep, all of those things that are vital and important for your well-being. Well-being for me can be summed up in 3 things: the way you think about yourself, the way you talk about yourself, and the way you treat yourself. And if you're doing those 3 things, you're most likely going to have good self-care. But always think of it and remember it from this perspective, that your well-being is like a jug. And if your jug is only 20% full, you can only give 100% out of 20% to your family, to your friends, to yourself, to your goals, to your dreams. But if you're operating in a lot of self-care and your jug is at 80 and 90%, you can give 100% of 80 to 90% to all of those people that are important in your life. So self-care is not selfish, it's what I call selffulness, which is the cousin of mindfulness. And selffulness is when you are always doing things that is going to better yourself and ensure your well-being so you can be the best version of yourself. And the final, number 6, is control what you can. Focus on the things that are within your control rather than the things that are outside of your control. Okay, there's always so many things that we can't do, but by focusing on them, what good does that do? But when you focus on what you can do and you utilize and use those things, it actually strengthens and empowers you. So it's really important to control what you can control. And the final quote I want to share is that when nothing is sure, everything is possible. You see, most people think when nothing is sure, that means it's going to go wrong. No, when nothing is sure, that means it can go well as well. That means you can succeed. That means you can prosper. That means you can do it. So don't allow those negative criminals to make you think negatively about everything. Okay? You have to challenge your thoughts. You have to speak life rather than death. And you have to be able to do the things that will help you to make the changes in your life that you seek and desire. So I do want to just share with you. So as I was saying earlier, that we only looked at block today, but I have developed a 2-part building mental fortitude masterclass series where we look at the other 5 in detail. And so these is what the 2-day workshop. So it's on the 2nd and the 9th of December from 7 p.m. It's a 2-hour, both of them are 2-hour workshops. And what we'll be doing in workshop 1 is we will discover and look at in a bit more detail the 6 mental criminals, and how they do impact on us. We'll be exploring the importance of priming your cognitive behavior. So we'll look at that technique and how you can use that to successfully prepare you for situations and circumstances. We'll examine the science behind why you are awesome. You know, we look at that, and when you realize and see about who you are and what you're made up of, that, you know, you are awesome, you're powerful. We're going to look at the first 3 essential toolkits for building mental fortitude. We'll reflect on 6 strategies that our mental criminals will use against us. Really important stuff. And then we will learn the essential techniques to defend against your mental criminals. And in day 2, we discover how all roads lead to doubt when we listen and focus on the wrong things. You will understand how to use the alignment principle to center yourself in situations and circumstances. We'll examine the importance of having the USA, so your unconditional self-acceptance approach and mindset. We'll look at the final 3 toolkits for building mental fortitude to be able to address, deal with, and manage those mental criminals. We'll reflect over the 3 Ps that drive us. And also we will learn why it is essential to turn knowledge into self-actualization, the process of doing that and why that is important. And so these 2 workshops together will be a cost of £39.50. And what I will be doing is a 10% discount for people because you've attended this session if you do want to purchase your ticket. So I will send an email afterwards with information about this if people do want to sign up.